Hello and welcome to State Matters. I'm your host, Matt Muratore. What do whales and superheroes have in common? Superheroes are awesome. It's common law that they live amongst us, hiding their true identity as they make our world a better place to live. Can it be that the whales off Plymouth's coast live in similar existence? Joining me for that discussion is the Executive Director of the Whale and Dolphin Conservation, Regina Asmutis, Silvia.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How
Thank
are
you
you
for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Did I get that last name right? Asmutis?
Asmutis.
Asmutis.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, we always start off our show introducing our guests and hearing a little bit about who you are. So who are you, Regina?
I'm a biologist by training.
Okay. Where'd you go to school?
I went to Bridgewater State University now. It
Yep.
was college at the time, and I did my undergraduate work there, and I also went there for graduate school. So I have undergraduate degrees in biology and chemistry and a graduate degree in biology.
Oh, okay. Okay. And you live in Plymouth?
I do live in Plymouth.
How long have you lived in Plymouth for?
25 years.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Terrific. So how did you get in this field? What made you interested in this?
I guess I was the kid that always took the Jacques Cousteau books out of the library.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always was really fascinated, and I just really liked whales and dolphins. But I actually started school pre-med and thought I wanted to get into the medical field, but I did an internship, and it was an internship with an organization that doesn't exist anymore, but it was called the Plymouth Marine Mammal Research Center, and I got hooked. I never turned back.
Were you looking to be a veterinarian? Is that what you were looking to try to do?
I thought about it, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Did you grow up on the coast?
I grew up in Brockton.
Oh, okay,
So not
okay, and
too
then
far.
moved to Plymouth.
Yep.
Okay, okay. All right, great. So tell us about your organization.
So Whale and
Talk
Dolphin
about the structure, yeah.
Conservation is a global organization.
Okay.
We're a 501c3 nonprofit here in the United States, but we have an office where it originated was in the UK. So the biggest and main office is still in the UK. There's an office in Germany and in Australia and in Argentina. And so there's a lot of different work going on globally with the same goal of realizing a world where every whale and dolphin is safe and free.
All right, and there are 5 around the world?
Mm-hmm.
And the one in Plymouth covers most of North America?
So our work here is largely for looking at species in North America. We have a couple of transboundary species that we really focus on that go from the U.S. to Canada, and so North Atlantic right whales on the east coast and southern resident orcas on the west coast. And so those are a really focal species for us. Also Gulf of Maine humpbacks that kind of hang around here off the coast of New England, and we also work on humpback issues in the mid-Atlantic. So we work with some of the companies down in Virginia and in New Jersey and New York, and so we kind of have a wide breadth. So if there's whales around, we try and do what we can to work and help them.
Now your office is on Nelson Street here in
Yeah.
Plymouth,
Yep.
okay. And how long have you been there for?
14 years?
Okay.
No, well,
okay.
I guess 12 years in Plymouth. So the WDC opened its North American office 14 years ago. We were in Falmouth initially,
okay.
but there's not a lot of access to whales down in Falmouth, so we moved the office to Plymouth because it was a better place to be able to see whales.
Now, do you have other employees that work with you as well?
Yeah, so we have 6 full-time employees. We're growing the office slowly and carefully, but we're going to add a couple people this year. So we've got a lot of people working a lot on boater education programs. We are working with sailing races. We're working with recreational boaters. We have a big whale sense program in Alaska and along the east coast of the U.S. to work with commercial whale watch boats. So we've a lot of different programs in different places. So we're very busy.
Do you travel around to all these different places?
I don't, but the staff does. So we had someone just in Alaska. We have a program. We were working with on some humpback issues in Beckwith. So we had folks going down there. So we're around a lot of different places and different issues.
Now you work with the town of Plymouth, the harbor master. Talk about your work with the town.
I cannot say enough
Yeah,
wonderful
talk
things
about
about
that.
the harbor master.
Yeah.
So Plymouth is a amazing place to be because there are whales and dolphins and seals and marine mammals that are here right off our coast, and unfortunately sometimes they do strand. And so the harbor master has been amazing in helping us with stranding response. So the permit for stranding response is under the New England Aquarium, and they have been amazing to work with and letting us know when there's animals that we can go out and try and help, or if we're measuring them or trying to figure out, transporting them up to the aquarium. We've had whales in the harbor. We had a humpback one time come inside of Long Beach went right by bug light and come in. We had a minke whale that went up into Kingston, way up by Gray's Beach one time. We've had right whales that have been hanging out by the Gurnet and up inside of Saquesh, and the harbor masters have been amazing to be able to, if it's babysitting right whales or helping us keep crowds away or just giving us access. We had a short fin pilot whale one time up in Warren's Cove, and they just helped us get out there to be able to monitor. So just not something I think that people think about the work of harbor masters, but they have been amazing.
Talk about the increase I think we see in whales and dolphins in this area. Why is that, do you think?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that it's an increase for us in our lifetimes of what we're used to seeing. It's still not anywhere near what historic levels were. So whaling still took a huge hit, and populations were diminished sometimes by up to 90%. And there were seal culls that happened in the 60s and 70s that extirpated some species from our area completely. So we're starting to see some of these populations rebound and rebuild. And so it's, in some respects, new to us. They're not new to our area. So some of it is a difference. We've seen some substantial changes since 2010, with some changes just in general in the Gulf of Maine climate, which have brought different species in and different places. So it's a combination of things. But overall, I think it's an incredible sign. We want these animals. We need these animals here, that they're an important part of the ecosystem. So it's really just sort of a good, I guess, sign for us to see them more often.
And why are they important to the ecosystem? If you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's where the superhero part comes in. That's the part that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
So, people know whales because they're cool. They may have been on a whale watch. There's this great whale watch company that runs right out of Plymouth, and Captain John boats.
I talk to him all the time, and every time they go out, they always see whales.
Yeah, they have very
Always see whales,
few trips. And
Yeah.
so, it's really, because this is an important feeding area from April through November, they are here somewhat reliably, and so you can go out and you can see whales, and it's amazing to see them, and you know that they're here. But the superhero part, kind of where they do this magic job that you don't realize the important role that they're playing, is what they're doing to sustain the oceans, and how they're helping to increase fish stocks, and how they're helping to give you every other breath you take, and how they're helping to get carbon out of the environment. And that's the cool part to me, is that they aren't just cool to watch. We need them. And so people think about breathing, they think that they need trees, and you do. But at least every other breath you take comes from the ocean. And that's because of this tiny little microscopic plant-like organism called phytoplankton, and it forms this ocean forest near the surface where the sunlight is, but it can't root into the soil. And just like you use plant food to sort of feed your plants in the yard because they need those nutrients, the phytoplankton need plant food too, and that's where the whales come in. And what's really cool is that they are these ocean gardeners, and they bring the plant food to the phytoplankton, literally because they can't poop under pressure. And so they're feeding at depth, and they're doing all these wonderful things when they're diving deep, but when they come up to the surface, that's their bathroom break. And that bathroom break is what fertilizes this ocean forest that we depend on. So you think about, you see a whale out there and it's really cool, but it has this phenomenally important tending this ocean forest that we depend on, and that's this incredibly important role. So that's where they get their cape for me. It's where they become the superhero of, they play a role that we all depend on. So the oxygen that we breathe, even if you live in Ohio, half of it at least comes from the ocean, and a whale's helping you get that. So I think that's pretty cool.
Wow, that's great knowledge. Now, there was a picture of a whale, I think, out of Plymouth Harbor not too long ago, but it looked like it had like bushes and trees in it.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we're really lucky to have one of the only places on the East Coast that we know that right whales aggregate at some point of the year. It's important habitat for them. And North Atlantic right whales are an endangered species. There's only about 400 of them left in the whole world.
And that is a North Atlantic?
And North Atlantic right whales have this weird, they have a very big head. It's about a quarter the size of their whole body. And they have these white bumpy things they look like that are on their heads, and that's how you can tell them apart. So you can photograph them. They're called callosities. And they're actually roughened tissue. They're calluses of tissue that have little hairs in them. And the reason they look white is because they have these tiny little cyamids or crustaceans or whale lice that live there and just kind of move around on there, and so that's what gives them the white coloring. But those whale lice are not harming the whale at all, but that's how we can identify who they are. And so you see these big weird heads moving along with these white bumps on them, and that's what you're seeing, one of the most endangered animals on the planet.
Is that right? And they hang around mostly up here?
So Cape Cod Bay is an important feeding and nursery habitat for them. Usually late winter, early spring. They start showing up actually. We've had some sightings even in the fall, November, December. But the bulk of the sightings seem to kind of kick in February, March, April. And the last few years they've been hanging out a little bit longer, even into the first couple weeks of May. They come here because they feed on copepods, these tiny little microscopic animals, and a specific kind of copepod called a calanus or pseudocalanus, and Cape Cod Bay has a lot of those in the spring. Okay. We have no idea how they find their food, but they're good at it, and they figure out that it's here, and so they will graze. And a lot of times we get people will call up and think that the whale's in trouble because it's almost like they graze through these patches like they're mowing the lawn, and so they'll just move and then they'll turn and they'll go back and forth through it, and so people think they're stuck, but in fact they're just literally mowing this patch of plankton and feeding on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, this show is called State Matters, so we try to connect with the state, with organizations in the community and all that. So in a talk that you were at earlier today before this taping, you were talking about some federal regulations and how the state's involved too. Can you talk about the federal regulations that started back in the 70s and what the state has done and it continues to do to help?
So in 1972, the federal government passed something called the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that protected all marine mammals regardless of their status. So it didn't matter if it was everything from a sea otter, a polar bear, to seals and whales and dolphins, and they were all protected. If there were a lot of them or a few of them, the country decided that they had an intrinsic value, that they were important to us, and so they gave them protection. In 1973, the Endangered Species Act passed as a federal mandate for species that were at risk of becoming extinct. Massachusetts has its own Endangered Species Act, and Massachusetts also works with the federal government to protect the species that share our coast. So in Massachusetts, we have a lot of state water because we have Cape Cod Bay. And so there's a joint enforcement agreement basically between the state and the federal government to protect the resources that are out there. And I honestly can't say enough good things about the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries and the work that they have done to protect all of their resources and in the fishing community that's here, and to try and walk that balance of making sure that both fishing and whales receive the protection that they need and deserve.
And I've talked to fishermen and lobstermen, and they have the same respect that you're talking about for the whales as well. And I've heard the same thing about the state has done a very good job at that balance of finding that balance with that. So that's really good. That's good to hear. So tell us about some of the other highlights of programs or projects that are going on for you.
Yeah, gosh, we have so much stuff going on right now. Some of the coolest stuff, I think, one of the coolest things that we have right now is a life-size inflatable North Atlantic right whale.
Yeah, talk about that. Our town manager in Plymouth loves that.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and she's based on the dimensions of an actual right whale.
So how big is it?
She's 45 feet long.
Yeah.
She's 25 feet across.
Okay.
We've had, I think, 30 or 40 kids up inside of her at a time. So you can go in and you can see how really big they are and get a feel for how similar they are to humans. There's a rib cage in there. There's where her lungs are. That a lot of this, her vertebrae, her backbone, they're our cousins in the sea, and so it's really kind of cool to be able to show someone how really big they are, but also talk about again the role that they play, and what people can do. I think that's one of our most important messages is trying to empower people, that everybody has something that they can do to help. And so she's really fun. We have our boater education programs. Like I said, we have See a Spout, which is working with recreational boaters. We have Whale Sense. That's the one in Alaska and on the East Coast, and that's working with commercial whale watch companies. And we have a Sharing the Seas program. We worked with the Volvo Ocean Race and some other sailing opportunities along the coast to try and make things safer, not just for whales, but for people. Obviously, they're really big animals. So, if a small boat interacts with a whale that's, 40,000 or 80,000 pounds, it's going to be dangerous for the boater too. So our goal is to try and, again, have that win-win. where you're out and you're looking at whales and you can enjoy it, but you're also safe when you're doing it because we don't want anybody to get hurt. So the boater education programs are really big. We are also working, we're part of the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Team, which is a federally appointed body to try and reduce entanglements. They're not intentional by any means, they're accidental. So what can we do to work with fisheries to try and reduce those impacts? We work on vessel strike issues to try and reduce those. Again, those are accidental, those issues of how do we make things safer so that we can slow ships down in certain areas or try and increase awareness about where whales are so that people could avoid areas and not interact with them. So our goal is always to try and figure out what we can do to help people enjoy whales, because we want people to see them and we want people to really appreciate them. We want people to understand how important they are, but we're just trying to make things better and not trying to prevent anybody from being able to have access to them.
What are some of the basic educations that you would give an average boater if they saw a whale?
So the National Marine Fisheries Service has specific guidelines that they have issued to make things as safe as they possibly can, and also to reduce the risk of harassing a whale on any level or moving it away from its food source. So you think about a whale that's up here from April through November, it's got that basically 6 or 8 months to gain 14,000 pounds, and that's all it has to do.
Yeah.
They don't get to eat a lot in the winter, so the only thing that they have to do now is get fat and to be able to have that fat reserve to survive the winter. So what we want is people to just not interact with them to a point where they're avoiding their food or that they're distracted. So kind of watch from a distance and let them eat, because they have to gain all that weight to survive. So the guidelines are issued to try and say, hey, this is a good way to watch them. It's a safer way to watch them. But there's a complicated little chart and picture, and it's not so simple maybe to look at. So we try to bring them down into some easy tips to remember. So see a spout, watch out. If you see one whale in an area, there's probably more than one, so you want to slow down and post a lookout. If you head on is wrong is another one. So we're trying to tell people to approach from the back or the side, because if you go in front of a whale, it'll change its course, and maybe it was going to some food. Steer clear of bubbles, because they bubble feed here often, so you don't want to go into the bubble cloud. So we're trying to make it a little bit more fun and an easier way to remember it, and we're doing a lot more interactions, I think, with some of the boating community. So we have a whale festival at the marina tomorrow, where we're going to go up to Quincy Bay Marina, and we'll have lots of fun activities and things to do. But it's also a chance to talk to the boaters about, hey, this is, do you have any questions, and have you seen whales, and also report. I think one of the things we're realizing with our boater education programs is we don't have to tell people how to run a boat. They know how to do that. But what they may not know is if they see an entangled whale, who to call. They may not know that if they see a right whale, who to call, because those sightings are opportunistic, are incredibly important, because there's not as many surveys out there. So there's an asset. These are people who have eyes and ears on the water that can really kind of help with their conservation just by making a simple phone call. So we can try and get that information to teach them who to call and depending on what they see.
Yeah. We're taping this right now at the end of June to be shown in July and August. What are some of the other programs in this area that folks from Plymouth? Now you were talking about the inflatable whale. What's the whale's name?
Delilah.
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 And where do you actually keep that?
So Delilah, we keep her at our office.
Yeah.
She obviously deflates, and we kind of tuck
Yeah.
her away.
Yeah.
But she's gone. She's had her own little migration so far. And she's gone everywhere from a variety of places in Massachusetts, Connecticut. In November, she's going to be in Florida. So we're trying to get her out as much as we possibly can.
Anywhere in this area coming up?
She was, Quincy, she'll be in the canal next weekend.
Yeah.
She'll be in Western Mass in August.
Okay.
We're going to get her in Nantucket sometime this summer. So
Good.
she'll be around a lot of
Well, like I said,
places.
off the air, really should hook up with Plymouth 400. I'm sure it'll be a wonderful program to do, we've got millions of people are going to be coming here looking for things to do, and that would be, I just think it'd be ideal. Yeah. So your funding comes from where?
Our primary funding is from individual donors.
Yeah.
We have something called the Whale Adoption Project. And so people can virtually adopt a whale, and then we send them updates on for humpbacks, who they're with and whether they had a calf and how many times we saw them or what they were doing. And so we give them updates on these really specific individuals that we see. We also do it for orcas on the West Coast. And that's our primary source of funding. We do have grant funding and from different foundations that we also get, and some corporate funding as well. We have a partnership now with Nantucket Whaler, which is a clothing company that's launching this year. Cisco Breweries is also helping to sponsor some of our work. And so we have a variety of funding, but mostly it's individuals. I think that's really important because we're doing the work on their behalf.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I heard you talk about at your discussion at the Center for Active Living that struck me was that whales are just like us. They have families. And, yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know you brought some items here too that maybe we can talk about as well.
Yeah. So I think one of the most amazing parts of my job is what I don't know, and that we're still learning. That there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much that we still learn every time we see them, and every time we, have the privilege of going out there and watching them. And we use a lot of terms, I think, that are very specific to humans, but they can apply. And so they have friendships. They will form these long-term friendships. And Salt and Pepper, for instance, were these two females that hung out that got their names because they were together. And Salt and Cardew hung out for a long time. And there's what I'm personally referring to as a little roving gang of teenagers that are these young whales that have kind of grown up together, and they still pair up and join up. And there's about 5 or 6 of them that sort of often we see them together in the summer. So they have friendships. They mourn the loss of their young. And sometimes there was an incident that made the paper with a southern resident orca who carried the dead body of her calf with her for 17 days, and she wouldn't leave it. And there's bonding that goes on. They play. I've seen them play with things in the water and just show curiosity. And I've watched a humpback for no other reason except it seemed like fun, surf down a big waves when we've seen them out there. So they have this incredible range of emotion, and they have culture. And I think that's one of the coolest things that we're really starting to tease apart now is the different cultures and different populations and how they learn from each other, not just from their parents and their moms. It's a matriarchy system. And here, what I talked about earlier was these humpbacks off the Gulf of Maine are the only humpbacks in the world that do this kick feeding behavior. Some innovative whale figured out that this was a good way to stun fish, and other whales picked up on it, and they learned from their friends. So if you think about, the music you listen to is probably different than what your parents listen to, and is probably different than what your kids listen to, because that's something that's culturally transmitted. You learn it from each other, and it kind of takes off. And these are behaviors in whales that are culturally transmitted. They didn't learn it at home. They kind of learned it from their friends, and they improve on it. And it's really fun to watch the progression and the evolution of just behavior and the thought that goes into some of these things.
You talked about one whale that gave birth. That's a mother or a grandmother or a great grandmother.
Yeah, so Salt's sort of the icon.
It's Salt,
So she's sort of the iconic whale that lives off our coast, and she's
like the Queen Elizabeth of the whales.
Yeah, she is. She's definitely they call her she's called the Grand Dame. For a reason. She's been seen every year since the 70s. She's had her 15th calf this year that we know of. She's helped us learn so much because she helped us learn where these whales went in the wintertime, because she was seen down in the Caribbean. She helped us learn that they calve every 2 to 3 years based on when she was returning with calves. She's helped us learn about culture because she's not a kick feeder. So that was something that she's very old school in her feeding, but some of her grandkids do kick feed, and she's helped us learn just about some of these friendships, and she will eventually help us learn about how long they live. Because we don't have a really good idea exactly what their lifespan is, but at some point when whole age classes start to not show up, we'll get a better idea. But we figure, it could be 80, 100 years old. We know bow-headed whales can live to be over 200, so there's still so much to learn.
Yeah. Tell us about some of these things you brought.
So I brought a couple pieces of artifacts that are
Now what is this?
From different species. So that's a backbone, a vertebrae from a pilot whale. So if you feel that little lump in the middle of your back there, that's the transverse process that sticks up there. So you can see that it's bigger than ours, but certainly they have a very similar backbone structure, so the spinal cord would go right through the middle right there. And so pilot whales are what we refer to as toothed whales or odontocetes whales. So if you think of dolphins and porpoises and some of the whales that have teeth in them, that would be, again, from a pilot whale that actually stranded off the coast here. And then the other kind of whales don't have teeth, they have baleen. And so this is in their mouths instead of having teeth, and this is baleen from a minke whale. So it hangs down from the upper jaw, and it kind of grows out of the upper jaw, this is where the gum would be. And it's just a big colander, it's a big filter, and because they can't process salt water any more than easily that really we can. So they eat and drink their fish. So they get most of their fresh water from the digestion of the fish that they eat. And so this is just a way to be able to grab the fish in the water and then filter out the water, but keep the fish in their mouths or the plankton. So it's made out of the same thing that your fingernail and your hair is made out of, a protein called keratin. And it's obviously lighter in color and smaller in a minke whale. This is a piece of baleen, or 3 pieces actually, from a humpback whale. So there's about 600 in their mouths. And you can see it's very coarse.
Yeah, so the hair, yeah.
Yeah, it's very coarse hair on the inside because they're fish eaters, as opposed to...
That's almost like a horse hair, yeah.
Exactly.
But this is finer.
And this is from a North Atlantic right whale, and it's very fine hair because they're feeding on plankton. So they need very fine hair to be able to capture their food.
Yeah.
And it's what whalers called whalebone. It was pliable when heated, so a right whale will have about 1,000 pounds of this in their mouth. And it was worth a lot of money, so that there was a lot of whaling initially that went for right whale baleen because you could heat it and bend it and make corset stays and buggy whips and the frames for glasses and different things that we use plastics for now. So this is sort of the precursor for plastic.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So what are some of the other things that we as humans can do to protect whales in the ocean?
I think honestly, it can be incredibly simple things that you do every day. And it becomes, I think people hear things on the news a lot about like, oh, skip the straw. And that's easy to do, actually. And,
somebody said that to me last night. I was at a function and I was drinking a Coke and I had a straw. I said, "You're doing that show tomorrow? You should be drinking out of straw. Don't let me see you drinking out of straw."
Yeah, but I mean, it's the straws aren't recyclable, so it's really easy to just skip the straw or get a paper straw because getting that plastic out of the environment is important to do. And so we know that marine debris is an issue. There was a whale that washed up in Virginia, unfortunately an endangered sei whale, and it was necropsy to find out why it died. And how it died was it mistakenly ate a piece of plastic DVD cover. And the piece of plastic cover had just kept cutting its stomach lining to the point where it killed it. So picking up a piece of trash that you see doesn't seem like maybe a big deal, but if someone had picked that up, the whale wouldn't have eaten it. So it just could be that simple of just picking up a piece of trash or saying no to the straw, shutting your lights off and trying to reduce some of the energy that is out there. They're everyday simple things, but they do add up and they do have a really big impact. And so we're doing a beach cleanup this weekend as well. And so just trying to make people understand that even those small actions that you take every day really can have a bigger impact. And one of the things I think for us in this community to think about, and something that's really easy to do this summer, particularly when you're getting family out and stuff, is try and find a place preferentially that serves Massachusetts lobster. Because these guys are under a lot more restriction than most of the rest of the East Coast is. And that's because of some of the right whales that are coming around here. And so if you're going to just make your choices, and so, if you got family coming out, maybe driving to Maine to get a lobster isn't the best choice. Maybe just come here and try and support the guys here that are under those restrictions. And promise you it's the same species of lobster. It doesn't taste any different.
Right. Yeah, it's a great message. That's great. So we're about out of time, but how can people learn more about what the whale and dolphin conservation does?
So our website's really easy. It's whales.org. So just anytime come to the website. It's contact@whales.org if you want to send us an email. We're in Nelson Street if you want to give us a call and stop by. We'd love to have you. it's there's no whales at the office. It's just a bunch of people and computers.
Right.
But we're always happy to talk to people and always looking for people. We're always looking for help and volunteers too. If anybody has some extra time and wants to help out, would love to hear from you.
To help the lobstermen, the fishermen, and also the whales as well. So,
Yep.
so thank you again. For what
Thanks
you do.
for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.